McCartney at the Sydney Flying Squadron for the AAMI Sydney Challenge, leg 4 of the National Circuit of Racing for 18-foot skiffs. With me again is Warwick Rooklin, and Warwick, the question is whether or not Rob Brown can sustain the charge.
Well, certainly, Bill, the chase is on, and Rob Brown and the boys on Prudential are hungry to knock Phil Barnett off the pedestal and take control of this national circuit.
Conditions a wee bit soft as we get out onto the water for race 1.
Jockeying for position at the start. And there goes the gun, and they're off and running in the crucial AAMI Sydney Challenge. And a beautiful start by Andrew Devola on skilled engineering, improving all the time. Prudential in red at the top end, also well placed. Scott Ramsden in Bank of New Zealand had an awful start. He's jammed in behind Prudential there, taking gas, and immediately decides to change directions and get out into some clear air. Skiffs all sailing as close as possible to directly into the wind. Prima drinks through the line late. Tip-top white high five late. Ella Bachet at the far end of the line, a terrific start.
Yes, and Andrew Devola really showed the more experienced skippers how to do it then. He was right on the line at full speed as the gun went. Prudential, good start from them. Xerox in a little bit of dirty breeze, but Bank of New Zealand an atrocious start.
But now have changed directions for the second time in this race, now heading off after the pack. We're on Sydney Harbour for this event. We start at the point off Taylor's Bay, up to the top mark near Shark Island, down to Chowder Bay, back through the start-finish line. That's 1 lap. We'll do 2 laps of that course. And tip-top white high five and Prima Drinks out on the left. Had a bad start, taking gas from the other skiffs, and they're not having a good time at all. This is on board Ella Bachet, Adrian Carlin calling for their first direction change of the day. And they're looking into being in pretty good shape, although being crossed there by Xerox, by Skilled Engineering and by Prudential. Thus, Ella Bachet currently 4th.
Conditions very light, the lightest we've seen on the Grand Prix circuit this year. Everybody has #1 rigs, in other words, the biggest sail available, and they're looking for all the horsepower they can get. Prudential has overtaken Skilled Engineering. Xerox has tacked back in hardly any breeze at all.
And now Prudential changing directions also underneath Xerox, but very close to them. That picture slightly deceptive, very little between those two skiffs at the moment. This racing coming courtesy of the Sydney Flying Squadron, Australia's oldest open boat sailing club, and indeed the true home of 18-foot skiffs throughout the world, the Sydney Flying Squadron. And they are managing the racing. This is their centenary year, and what a great year we're having on that 100th birthday.
And you can see some of the boats there with the crews, not all of them out on the end of the wings, some of them having to run in off the end of the wings. But Bank of New Zealand there in good pressure, all 3 guys out with maximum horsepower. So that's good news for them. They've obviously found where the breeze is, Ella Bachet, with good breeze as well. As they move away from the land into the middle of the harbour, the breeze will increase slightly. And the head cam today is on board Ella Bachet, being warned by the skipper, Adrian Carlin. And they're the pictures that we're getting right there.
Very smooth tack from the team on Ella Bachet. Neil McDonald in the bow, Craig Ramsden in the middle, Adrian Carlin, the driver, sailing as close as possible to directly into the wind, crossing ahead of Tasmania Naturally Different, zigzagging their way up the course, and now about halfway through the first leg of this course. And at the moment, Ella Bachet doing very nicely, but Prudential crosses ahead of Bank of New Zealand. So Rob Brown maintaining form and looking fancy at this stage of the first race of the AAMI Sydney Challenge.
And we'll see a lot of direction changes today as they cross in front of Ella Bachet. And the reason for so many direction changes is the breeze never stays constant. It's always moving, and the guys have to work out their tactics accordingly, and the team that can work it out the best will get to the top mark first.
Ella Bachet down the bottom right hand, tacking now, changing directions, got knocked badly there. You can see the wake from the Ella Bachet, how it suddenly swerved away as they got the change in direction of the breeze. Xerox coming up with the wind coming over their right-hand side on a starboard tack, and doing very nicely indeed. Just got the wood on Prudential at this stage. So these two back again, hammer and tongs.
And Xerox obviously got a good shift there and worked the first part of the windward beat very well, because they were buried behind Prudential, and now they're up there fighting with them.
Xerox narrowly ahead of Prudential. Tacking now. Oh, Prudential's got right of way here. Prudential has right of way. Xerox forced to go again. Bad mistake by the boys on board Xerox. Phil Barnett there, I don't know what he had in his mind. Now, having grabbed the advantage, Rob Brown slams into a tack, and right there, and Xerox now follows. So what, 2 tacks later, Xerox is out the back door by a good 20 seconds.
Yes, and I thought Xerox probably had enough space to pull behind Prudential, but obviously on board they saw it a little bit differently, and that's exactly what Rob Brown wanted to do. That's a little bit more match racing tactics coming out, and so the 2 protagonists of the penultimate round of the Grand Prix event are locked in battle.
Elabashe coming up on starboard tack. Bank of New Zealand crosses just ahead, so getting up towards the top end of the course for the first time. Bank of New Zealand is 3rd. Elabashe is 4th, and up above them, a battle royal once again developing between Rob Brown and Phil Barnett. Prudential just ahead of Xerox, and the right-hand side of the picture, only a boat length, maybe a boat length and a half in it. Not too far behind them, and also doing nicely, is Andrew Cuddy in tip-top wide high five. They're currently 5th, but certainly within striking distance and doing very well indeed.
And Bank of New Zealand has elected to work off the island, Shark Island, and the breeze increasing as they get to the top end of the mark. Prudential and Xerox locked in battle, nothing in this. They've both overlaid the top mark, in other words they've gone further than they have to and pulling their boats away and are generating more speed. Coming around for the first time, we have Prudential in the lead and hoisting the spinnaker immediately with Xerox hot on the hammer. So now it's a down to the crews to see who can get the spinnakers up quickly and try and get back the early advantage from Prudential, but a great set on board Prudential. Elabashe starting to ease their sheets. You can see the sails are out a little bit further than normal. That means they've overlaid the mark just by a little bit. In other words, gone further than they had to and lost a little bit of time there.
Okay. Are you ready? Okay, where we go? Off you go, Neil.
Adrian Carlin calling the shots with the boys on board Elabashe, and once again in fine position, setting the spinnaker from the windward side. Unusual to see they've set it up. That's usually a tough job. That won't help them at all.
Well, that's actually a mistake they've made. Usually before the start, people think about which side the spinnaker will go up and have it on the right side, but obviously a little mistake there, and that would have cost them vital seconds. But jibing now, Prudential and Xerox changing direction. Xerox covering every move of Prudential, and then a bit of a gap back to Elabashe and Bank New Zealand.
Currently back in 7th position, Prima Drinks still with the fleet. They copped a bit of rough stuff at the start, but Dave Lamont's got Prima Drinks right back up there, just approaching that top mark now in the background. Meantime, tip-top wide high five, right on the tail again of Elabashe. Andrew Cuddy always snapping at the tail of Adrian Carlin there, and sometimes looking as though he's going to get ahead of them, but out in front, continuing their great form of recent times, Rob Brown and the crew on board Prudential. Xerox now making a move.
Yes, Xerox trying to get above Prudential and trying to get the wind and take it away from Prudential and try and overtake them. But Rob Brown will fight hard. If it comes to a close contest, Prudential has right away. They can force Xerox up as high as they like. And if there's a touch there, the judges will be watching and Xerox may have to do a turn. So Phil Barnett will have to watch everything he does.
Well, Phil Barnett, we've been talking about how good Rob Brown is, but the simple fact is that Phil Barnett in Xerox is leading this series. I'd like to talk to you a bit more about that in a moment, Warwick. In the meantime, we're on Elabashe. She's just behind Bank of New Zealand, getting ready for a change of directions now.
Neil McDonald sprinting across the wings to stabilise the boat. And Craig Ramsden pulls on the new sheet to get the spinnaker setting on the right side.
A nice piece of work. But coming back to Phil Barnett, current positions, coming back to Phil Barnett in a moment, current positions, there we see it. Tip-top wide high five back there in 5th, Skilled 6th, Cruising Rangoon 7th, and Prima Drinks right on their tail in 8th position. But here they are, the leaders in the national circuit, the best young crew in the business, and certainly with Rob Brown, Phil Barnett, the best of the skippers on the water.
Yes, well, Phil's really come of age this year. He's been in the 18s a long time, and this year he's really showing that he's championship material, and he's done everything right. Now Rob Brown, the seasoned campaigner, is mounting a challenge on him, and it's going to be interesting to see whether Phil can sustain the pressure that Rob Brown is putting on him.
Getting down towards the bottom end of the course to complete one lap, Prudential a narrow leader. Xerox second, Bank of New Zealand third, Elabache fourth. We've said that a few times this season so far, Warwick.
Yes, there's certainly a bit of a pattern developing in the last couple, but we've got to remember early on, another jibe by Elabache. But early on, Xerox really stamped their authority all over this racing, but now Prudential has come back and Elabache has been knocking on the door for a major win all season, and Bank of New Zealand has won a couple, so anybody can win these races. And as we get down to the bottom for the first time, the breeze is dying out again, and this is a pattern that's developed also on this course. The light air at the bottom end of the course and the heavy air at the top.
The course. There's the course, Shark Island up the top end, Prudential in red just around the bottom mark leading, Xerox in white just coming up to it, and right behind them in blue, Bank of New Zealand. That's completing the first lap, so we're around about 50% of the way through this race. It's still wide open. The AAMI Sydney Challenge is still wide open, and the national circuit as a whole is still up for grabs.
Yes, and Rob Brown will be looking over his shoulder and liking what he sees, because what he sees is Bank of New Zealand mounting a pressure on Xerox, and that means that the heat is being taken off him. It means he can get on with the job of winning this race and taking back the initiative in this challenge.
And just there we see Xerox doing much better than Bank of New Zealand, up behind Prudential, the leader. Prudential seems to be in slightly better pressure there, and Prudential starting to open up a little bit here, and indeed having a very good race. Xerox was right with them a little bit earlier on when they were coming down off the breeze, but now Phil Barnett has lost a little bit of time to Prudential and struggling to stay with them.
Yes, and Elabache looks good there down to leeward, and Prima and Rangoon fighting it out at the bottom mark, and I think a bit of a collision here. Holy dooly, the back markers are getting stuck into it.
That is a...
Oh, Rangoon on the fin. Thank you very much. That'll be a little bit of a swim for the boys.
And some carnage. The Prima drinks locked into the cruising Rangoon, now starting to come out, and the spinnaker pole has been snapped. The spinnaker pole, or the bowsprit out the front of Prima drinks, has been snapped off. That was a full-on T-bone collision, and it looks to me like the umpires have got some work to do back there. Meantime, Prudential holds on to a tight lead just over Xerox and going very nicely.
Yes, and the breeze starting to increase again as they get away from the land. When they get close to that big cliff there, the breeze lifts up over the cliff, so the breeze lightens on the water, and we can see the guys working the sheets there.
And Phil Barnett, the skipper, has a job to do here. He's behind Prudential. He's got to do something fast. He's the man holding the tiller. He's got to point it somewhere and change things.
And the tiller is that aluminium rod that he has there to control the rudder, which makes the boat go where he wants it. Well, that's the plan anyway.
That's the plan, sometimes not as easy as that, I gather, Warwick, when the breeze gets pumping. But today we've got a fairly gentle, calm, sweet day almost on Sydney Harbour, which is not what we're used to, but we're prepared to cop it sweet, no worries at all. As Prudential goes through a direction change, looks to me like she's just going to keep a very, very close eye on Xerox for the rest of this race, try and keep between them and the next mark, cover them all the way, and at this stage, Rob Brown, Dave Slannett and Chris Harmson looking very, very good for victory in this first heat of the AAMI Sydney Challenge.
Well, it's a bit early to talk about victory, Bill, so don't put the clappers on them. And it might be sweet on the harbour, but I don't think it's sweet on board these boats, because these guys are pumped up. They've got to take the challenge here. They've got to win it to keep the series alive. So there'll be no relaxing on board any of these boats right now.
Direction change on Prudential. Now getting up towards the top mark for the last time. Beautiful tack. You saw that skiff hardly overbalanced either way going through. It's a tremendously difficult manoeuvre to undertake. Elabache in fourth position. Tip-top white high-five, as usual, snapping at them, trying to get to them. And right behind them and within striking distance as they change directions up near Shark Point. Nilsson Park just over that fence. And coming up now on starboard tack, Elabache changing directions also. Nice tack on Elabache. She's in fourth position. First place, running into the top mark now. Rob Brown on Prudential, and they seem to have a bit more breeze here now.
Yes, you can see that the sail at the back there starting to flap around a little bit, and that means there's too much breeze for the amount of sail they got up. Running in now for the hoist. Up goes the spinnaker up the mast. Hand over fist pulling it up. Out to the end of the pole. pulling it on to get it set.
Dave Slennett hooks up. Out he goes. Reputedly the best forward hand in the business, but young Dave Ewing's on board this machine. Would argue with that, I'm sure, because he's come on in leaps and bounds this season, Dave Ewing. His work has been phenomenal. We saw that drop in Melbourne when they passed Bank of New Zealand. Excellent piece of work. Here again today. Up she goes. There's Dave Ewing in the bow. Dave Gibson, the bigger chap, who pulled the spinnaker to the top of the mast. And there she is, another beautiful set from the team on Xerox.
And both these crews are extremely fit, extremely agile, and they make the work look very easy, but I can tell you it's not easy at all.
Sydney Harbour, venue for the AAMI Sydney Challenge. Leg 4 of the National Circuit of Racing for 18-foot skiffs. We're looking at 4th and 5th, Elabashe 4th. Tip Top White High Five 5th, and doing well. There they are, approaching that top mark. Tip Top White High Five in yellow has to do 2 more tacks to get around the mark. Elabashe will make it in red, going downwind, leading the race. Around about a minute and a half ahead of those two is this machine. The flyer called Prudential. Right behind her, Xerox in second position. Rob Brown continuing his charge in this series.
Yes, and Rob Brown is really mounting the pressure upon Phil Barnett now. And Phil wants to wrap it up here. He can win the overall series if he wins here in Sydney, but Rob Brown has got different ideas.
Rounding the mark on Elabashe, currently in 4th position. Out ahead of them in 3rd was Bank of New Zealand, and up ahead leading, and what a lovely picture. What a nice way to spend a weekend, eh? Out on an 18-foot skiff, virtually flying, hanging out the side of that machine, and a little hand signal from Rob Brown as well, perhaps a friendly wave.
Yes, I don't know if it's so friendly, but Rob looks pretty relaxed. He's looking over his shoulder to see where Xerox is. It's developed into a match race. He's accustomed to being in that position, and I'd say he's pretty calm, but certainly not going to sleep yet.
18-foot skiffs, the ultimate in sail racing machinery. The ultimate, oh goodness me, Tasmania, naturally different in strife on the banks of Shark Island. The boys de-rigging will try and get a handle on what happened to them, but they've had a bit of misfortune. But coming back to the 18-foot skiffs, they are the ultimate sail racing machine. Any young person considering sailing, I guess, Warwick, look at the 12-foot skiffs, the 16-foot skiffs, the 14-foot skiffs to learn about these machines, and then you target the 18s as the ultimate.
Well, that's right, Bill. I remember when I was a kid and looking at the 18-footers on the harbour, I used to aspire to one day getting on board them. And I think any young kid sailing in small boats looks at these boats and dreams and hopes that one day they'll be racing them too.
And Rob Brown, someone who's been racing 18s now for some 17 years, leading this race and signalling to our camera vessel that the wake is just giving them a little bit of bother, and very polite about it he was as well. Perhaps that's because he's leading at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. He's in a good position. He knows that all he has to do now is keep it under control, and he'll probably win this race. But Elabashe now starting to mount a little bit of a challenge on Bank of New Zealand.
Elabashe has been very fast off the wind with the spinnaker set, with the wind behind them as they are now, the wind coming over their right shoulders, slightly behind them, and gathering a tremendous amount of pressure. And all season long, Elabashe has been very fast off the wind and has made up a lot of ground on those in front. So Bank of New Zealand's position at 3rd may be under challenge as they go for the spinnaker drop, getting down towards the finish now of the first heat of the AAMI Sydney Challenge, and dropping the spinnaker on Prudential to then head up towards the finish line.
Will Xerox do a late drop like they did in Melbourne? Are they that close? This is crunch time. No, Xerox has closed up a little bit, but not enough.
Not enough, and Prudential rounds that bottom mark, and very, very tough now for Xerox to get them. Prima Drinks just getting up towards that top mark, so one leg of the course behind the leaders, but you can see they've got no nose. You see there's no bowsprit poking out in that collision with Cruising Rangoon. Their spinnaker pole broke off, makes it very, very difficult for them. The boys persisting, however, and Prudential goes through to win the first heat of the AAMI Sydney Challenge. A great performance by Rob Brown, still continuing his comeback. Another excellent performance from Elabashe and Tip Top White High Five. And Rob Brown on shore is there to talk about his return to form.
I just wish the series would go a little bit easier for us. You know, like every regatta we go to, we're sort of clutching at straws and crawling out of the sandpit trying to get a victory up, and it always comes down to the last race, which is nail-biting stuff, puts a lot of pressure on us, the crew, the sponsor, our supporters. I suppose it's good in the end when it's all over, but it's one hell of a time when you've got to go through it.
The reason why Prudential's getting back into this thing is because their pace is coming good. At last they're matching it with Xerox. It'll be fascinating to see what happens tomorrow when we return for race 2.